Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking the time today to join us for today's webinar, REMI PI Plus Model Training for Google and Apple Hubs in Raleigh, North Carolina. My name is Amanda Lambert. I'm the Marketing Event Coordinator here at REMI, and I have the pleasure of serving you your webinar as the host this afternoon. Our speaker today will be our REMI analyst, Gaisha Blackshear. Gaisha is our business development analyst, and she works to ensure REMI users are able to effectively incorporate the REMI model into their organizations and support their economic modeling needs. And for that, I will hand it over to you, Gaisha, to take on the presentation.
Hello, everyone, and also thank you, Amanda, for the introduction. So today's first part of our four-part training series will feature IPI Plus model, and as well as she said, is going to measure the impacts of Google and Apple Hubs in Raleigh, North Carolina, and as well as impacts on the entire state. So without further ado, we will get started. But first, I'm just going to give you all a quick rundown of what to expect from this presentation. So, of course, what's going to come next is an explanation of REMI, who we are, what we do, and also how our model works. The next thing is going to be the economic impacts of establishing these hubs. Then directly after that is going to be our Google and Apple simulation, whereas you all will get a quick overview of some of the variables and levers in which that we will pull during our live demonstration. And then we will have an overview of our Policy Insights Plus model, just to give you all some more information as well as context of this model. And then second to last will be our live PI Plus demonstration, which will also include the methodology of how we arrived at these particular numbers, and as well as, so it will help you better understand the forecast. And lastly, we will have our question and answer portion. So with that being said, you may be wondering if you do not already know who exactly we are. So for close to 40 years, we have been the gold standard in economic modeling for the simple reason that we combine four significant levers within our model, which includes the input-output capability, econometrics, economic geography, and as well as the general equilibrium equation. So this allows for us to not only measure inter-industry relationships, but as well as to back this with statistical analysis to understand how is this going to impact economies in the long run, and as well as how will this particularly impact them regionally, which allows for our users to not only have a forecast in which they can trust, but as well as the confidence to know that they are getting the whole economic picture rather than just a point in time, and also a very sophisticated analysis. And so that is what makes us the gold standard in economic modeling. And then in addition to this, you're probably wondering, how exactly do we define model regions? So the greatest part about it is the fact that these are in particular customized by the client's needs. And so we can define your regions all the way down to census blocks. So whether that is a metropolitan area, a state, a cluster of counties, or even some cities. So whatever in which that can be captured by that particular federal agency, we have the capabilities to do that. So what exactly makes us different from your particular static model versus your dynamic model? Well, for the simple reason that we give you a more realistic analysis of all the variables and also how will they be impacted by your different inputs. So And not only that, is that a static model catches a point in time, but we're also able to forecast our results all the way out until 2060, which allows for you to understand not only the impacts on things such as output, employment, the population, GDP, the price index, but as I said previously, is that allows for you to understand and analyze the entire economic picture of what's occurring. And so, in addition to me explaining to you all about the 4 levers in which that we use to create our model, but exactly how does this work? Or like, what is the process for this, you may be asking. So the first thing in which that we start with is a policy question, which is such as, how would this policy shot impact this region, or the different economic variables, and as well as now we have the added functionality of socioeconomic variables, which is in our social, which is featured in our social economic indicators module, in which that we will see later. So how will this impact not only the region and as well as the communities? The next thing we do is that we break down the questions into particular policy variables, which that can be used based upon the data that is available. And of course, if you all are current clients or future clients, we offer unlimited technical support. So say if you ever need help with determining which policy variables would be best for the data available, we'd be happy to do that. So the next thing which that we do is that once we input it into the REMI model, is that we combine general equilibrium, the input output, as well as econometrics and economic geography, in order to produce an alternative forecast, but can be compared to your control forecast. And then so the control forecast is going to feature data from different federal agencies, such as the American Community Survey, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and as well as BEA and a host of others, in order for you to compare and contrast these changes, how they would impact your region and as well as your overall economy. So the next thing in which that we are going to get into are the economic impacts of establishing these hubs. So the core things in which that we produce from the research in which that we've done for this webinar is that this is primarily going to impact employment, direct investment, and as well as compensation. As Google has promised to employ over 1,000 people over the next few years, and Apple is expected to employ over 3,000 people over the next decade. And in addition to this, Apple is expected to spend $1 billion on a square foot campus in Raleigh, North Carolina. And then both hubs are expected to take ground in the year 2023. And then as far as Google's direct investment, you may be asking, what are they going to contribute? But from the research in which we've done is that Google has actually already invested billions into North Carolina. So those particular numbers were not considered, since this is just going to measure the impact of what's going to come in the years 2022 and beyond. And lastly, the thing in which that we're going to take into consideration is going to be the compensation, as both companies have promised six-figure jobs for their employees. But however, again, with Google, we have come across an article to whereas they are actually doing a wage compensation adjustment for their current North Carolina employees, where they're actually going to pay them less than those employees that would be on the West Coast. However, Apple has promised after 3 years of being in North Carolina that there will be an average salary of $187,000. So just to give you all some context of what exactly, so just to give you all some context of the case study, but as well as some background on the data. So to make sure that was clear. And so, but of course, although we may have some downsides, but there's always a silver lining. So this will be a win-win, not only for the state of North Carolina, but as well as for Google and Apple. And most importantly, the North Carolina residents. As with the state, we will see an increase in tax revenue because we have higher salaries. We also have more construction that will be implemented in order to accommodate these people, and as well as the byproducts of a new population, as well as wage demand, which includes such as restaurants and as well as retail stores. And there will be investments in transportation as well as infrastructure. And lastly, their economic competitiveness and growth will show these things. So therefore, they will hopefully become a power, or rather a source of power within the South, especially when they have two prominent tech companies coming to invest within their state. Secondly, this will be a win for both corporations because it allows for them to attract and as well as retain strong technical talent that is housed within the southern, which is housed within the South, but as well as North Carolina is a prime location to grow their corporation as well as diversify their assets. And lastly, for the North Carolina residents, this will give them access to up to 5,000 high-paying and as well as in addition to this, the 5,000 new jobs will give them access to high-paying jobs, which will overall, we hope, would help everyone and not just a few who have the technical skills. But another plus side is the fact that both Apple and Google have pledged to at least reserve 1,100 jobs for North Carolina residents. So again, that is another silver lining. So now we're going to get into the Google and Apple simulation, just to show you all what data and as well as policy variables in which that we will be using to capture these effects. So with that being said, one second, just to show you all. So excuse me for the technical difficulties, but this is just an Excel spreadsheet, which is going to be used in order to copy and paste our data from this particular, sheet into the REMI model. So the primary policy variables that will be used will be employment, our exogenous final demand variable, and as well as our compensation policy variable. And so just to explain what exactly is going to occur during the simulation, so, and as well as to give you a thorough breakdown of the sheet, is that first, Google, since their hub is going to be primarily cloud engineering, so this would be housed under, so the closest NAICS code would be the computer design services. And in addition to this, Apple's will be mostly focused on things such as machine learning and as well as artificial intelligence. So this is going to be housed under the technical and scientific development NAICS code. And so as far as employment, since Apple has said that they will employ at least 150 people this year in 2022, so that's why we have Google said that they will employ at least 150 people in the year 2022. And then so, since they did not specify how many people in which that they, or rather like they did not give a definite timeline of how long in which that they would employ the 1,000 people into their particular corporation. So it just stopped at 2030. But Apple said that over a decade that they would employ 3,000 people. So this was just spread randomly, but it is decreasing in number over the years. And then the next component, or rather the next policy variable that will be used will be the exogenous final demand variable. And then this is to primarily capture the infrastructure, transportation investments from the construction needed when building the Apple Hub. And then so the reason why this started in 2023 is because since the articles were saying that they plan to take stake in North Carolina in 2023. And also this will be measured in billions. And the reason why that this is ongoing for 4 years is because from other research in which that was done is that it said that their giant Apple Hub in California, well, rather their $5 billion, their giant $5 billion Apple Hub took 4 years to complete. So we just applied that same number to this particular particular project as well. And then the next thing in which that we're taking into consideration here is going to be our compensation variable. But in order to not change the compensation for the entire industry, but just to account for the jobs in which that will be brought by by Apple in general, what we had to do is go into our regional forecast, which will be found here, which is something in which I've previously shown you all. And then so we went and gathered the compensation rate baseline variables for each NAICS code that would represent Google and as well as Apple. But since Google plans to cut their employees' pay rates by 25% in comparison to their California employees, we just did not consider any changes in the particular compensation rate differentials at all. But however, with Apple, we did, since they plan to pay their employees $187,000 on average after 3 years. This was recorded this was recorded in this particular block here. And in addition to this, they also said that they would start with an average salary of $133,520, but each salary raise has been adjusted for the 2% average raise that occurs yearly for most companies. And mind you, we did aim to be very conservative with these numbers because we didn't want to overstate the effects. And then after that, in order for us to find the compensation policy variable, this would include us multiplying the compensation rate differential by the number of employees in an industry. So with that being said, is that the compensation rate differential for the baseline in North Carolina was subtracted. So the projected Apple salaries were subtracted from the original compensation rate baseline variables, or rather like output variables. And then they were multiplied by the number of projected employees, since we knew that in total that there was 3,000, but however, we kind of just have to spread the numbers. And then that is what's going to enable us to have an accurate compensation variable number which again, we will just paste all of these into Excel. Well, of course, except for the compensation rate baseline, as well as the compensation rate baseline adjusted for the average salaries. So, and of course, if you all have any questions, or if you like the write-up in which that I prepared, as well as this Excel sheet for this particular methodology, just in case you're dealing with the same things within your region, I will gladly forward that to you as well. And so, with this being said, is that now, since we have an explanation of the policy variables and as well as the data that will be used, we will now go forth to explaining what exactly is PI Plus. And so, as we can see here, is that this is more so like an under the hood view of the model. And as we can see, is that we consider five particular subjects for our overall like economic analysis. So this includes things such as output demand, population, compensation, market shares, and labor, and capital to demand. And then so each arrow represents the particular connection, and as well as whichever box is going to impact what. So say if we increase the production costs, we can see that that has a direct effect on our domestic and as well as international market share, and as well as composite prices. And then so this just allows for us to comprehensively analyze the relationship between policy and as well as like its economic foundations, which allows for our users to use this as a communicative tool to make informed decisions. And then so now we will hop right into our PI Plus model demonstration. And so with this being said, since we've already gone through a quick overview of the particular policy variables that will be used in this particular model, so now we will go through the regional, well, rather I'm explaining the different components of this particular model. So just to give you all a quick model tee up. So this is going to feature 2 regions, and then this is the state of North Carolina and as well as the rest of the United States. And then this is going to feature our 160 sector model. Of course, depending upon your needs, you can either get this customized to only include 23 sectors or either 70 sectors, but that is completely up to you. And then so just to give you all a quick overview of our home screen. So down here, we have our regional forecast and as well as national forecast, which, as I mentioned previously, is going to give you your baseline numbers that are based completely on not only the sophisticated equations that back our model, but as well as historical data. And then so just to give you all a quick overview, but we're not going to get too in the weeds in this particular section because we will explore this more once we do our simulation. So this is going to feature your projections all the way out until 2060. And also the greatest part about this is the fact that you also have the choice to display your model results however in which that you like. So this includes not only making it into a quick line chart in which that can be found here, but you also have your choices to make this into a pie chart as well as a stacked bar chart. It is your decision. In addition to this, you also have other customization tools, which includes the ability to change the data filtering. And so this allows for you to include or disinclude certain variables in which that you like, as well as the years, And then, of course, we keep data in here all the way up until, all the way back until 2001. And as well as your regional displays, forecasts, and as well as comparison types. You also have this choice also to customize your table, pivots, and as well as units as well. And of course here to find more info about the particular graph in which that you may be using or table, and as well as print out these particular numbers, and even to favorite these things, and as well as to view this in the Explorer. And then so not only do you get your comparison, within like your baseline forecast, but you also have the ability to calibrate quite a lot within this model, which is shown in your new regional control. And so in your new regional control, this is going to feature the ability for you to update your population, employment, and as well as even your baseline numbers, just in case they are not captured accurately within the model. Because we update our models yearly, but however, we also go based upon when the federal agency data is available. So it's always something to keep in mind. In addition to this, let's say if you don't agree with the particular equations in which that we've employed within the model, you also have the ability to change those as well. And of course, if you want me to go more in depth about, especially with changing equations, or any other customization in which you may be thinking of, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll gladly schedule a one-on-one session with you as well. So the next step of this is that before we get into our new regional simulation, which is how we're going to build our model, there's going to be our regional profile, which is going to feature a quick overview of North Carolina, and everything else is just going to represent the rest of the United States. But this includes things such as the employment, population, work profile, so you'll know exactly what in which that you will be working with. So now, to create your new regional simulation, you have either the choice to go over here to the forecast, so whereas you're able to build it based from your national or regional control, or we can go directly through the home screen, which is going to be our choice for today. So for the first policy variable, what we're going to do is choose it from one, well, rather, we're going to choose this from the full list. But of course, you have a lot of directionality within this model. So either you can base this off of sales, employment, population, labor supply, or you can go over here to the scenarios, to whereas we will give you an exhaustive list of recommended variables in order to build these different policy simulations. And then the same thing occurs within our model linkages, which is also in that particular, this is also housed within the model as well, but it's highly interactive, and you also get an exhaustive list of what would best capture these particular variables within your simulation. But since today we're only going to focus on the direct investment, employment, and as well as compensation, we're just going to go right over here into our full list, and we're just going to search for them. So we're just going to name this as Apple and Google simulation, employment. And again, I did also want to emphasize is that if you all wanted a thorough explanation of each variable used, I would also be happy to email you that write-up as well. And so now we're just going to choose employment here, and now we're going to choose select. And so for this particular policy simulation, since we do have how much investment, well, rather construction investment will be done by Apple, but not necessarily by Google, but it's still very relevant. We are going to choose industry, exogenous projection, and we're also going to choose to nullify the investment, just so we will not be double counting anything when running the simulation, because overstating the numbers can be very bad. So now, since the first thing in which that we're going to use is going to be computer design services for Apple. So we're going to go here, do our search for industries, design. All right, here we are. Computer systems design and related services. In addition to this, we're also going to include Google's next code as well, which is scientific research and development services. So we're just going to control click both of those. And then next we're going to choose our region, which is going to be North Carolina. And for our units, we are going to do this by units to account for each individual employee yearly. And so now, since we have all of our numbers currently in Excel, we're just going to copy and paste these directly into our model. Copy. And so with this particular simulation, we could stop here, but however, since we do have more information, we're just going to make it a bit more comprehensive. So in addition to this, we're also going to include our exogenous final demand as well, which is going to allow for us to capture our construction. And construction is going to be here in the region of North Carolina. And then this is going to be captured in nominal billions. Add this to our editor as well. And so we're just going to go right back to our Excel document. This is from 2023 till 2026. And then our last variable in which we're going to consider now is going to be our compensation rate. I'm sorry, compensation, not compensation rate. We built compensation from the compensation rate. Now we're just going to go here as well. We're going to click this. And of course, if we want to see what exactly this directly affected, we can go easily over here to our diagram to understand what exactly is this impacting and how. I'm going to click next again. So we're going to click compensation here. And again, the reason why we are choosing compensation is because it will not change the compensation rate for all employees in this particular industry, only for those who are coming to work for Apple in those particular years. But of course, if you want to do an overall new baseline for those particular industries, you have the power to do that as well. But just to make this more realistic, we're just going to consider those two. And then in addition to this, we're going to add we're just going to add Apple's industry. Get a quick reminder really quick. And that was the scientific development. And that's for North Carolina. Then for our units, we're going to use nominal. And then the next step is going to be in the thousands. Since this was computed using thousands of units with our compensation rate. And then so, from here, we're just going to copy and paste this last line. And we're going to go back to our model simulation. Make sure I have the right years. So this is for 2023. All right. So now we officially have all of our variables. And then so now we do have the option to forecast this however long in which that we want to, or to just capture a particular point in time. However, we are going to forecast this up until 2035, just so we can capture some short-term effects of this policy, and as well as just a bit of long-term. I'm just going to run our forecast.
Gaisha, you're muted. Can't hear you, Gaisha. You're still muted. Gaisha, you're muted.
How about now?
Got it. It's working. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, sorry about the technical difficulties. But as I was saying, that now since we've ran our forecast, so since we only want to focus on North Carolina and not necessarily have to go back and forth, we're going to go up here to our master selection panel. And then so this is going to enable us to just focus on that particular region and not the rest of the United States. So we're just going to enable that here. And if we wanted to only use a select number of units or comparison type, we also have that functionality as well. So now I'm just going to click out of here. And so as we can see, is that we can see relatively positive changes within the overall economy over the years. But we can view this better using a line chart. So it seems as if that there was a bit of boom, and then in 2006, there was slightly a bust. But we can probably chalk that up to the fact that with the construction jobs that were no longer available, this means that this probably caused a downtrend because not as many people are working, except for the people who are getting compensated highly by the particular tech companies. So this allows for our clients to know that, hey, maybe we should implement more workforce development programs or put new policies in place to whereas we can prevent these projections from happening 3 to 4 years or 5 years down the line after these wonderful companies have come in town. And so we also have the ability to explore this further with employment, and as well as all the key results within this particular, well, rather all of like the tabs within the key results can be explored further using things such as our economic tools, demographic tables, and as well as analytical tools. So just something to keep in mind as well. But overall, we can see that that for all industries within South Carolina, that the benefits were positive all the way up until 2030. And then this was for all industries. And of course, we do have the ability to change this to our percent changes to see whether that's relative to the baseline. And so percent-wise, it seems as if it's not much, especially when things begin to turn. But however, there has been some significant changes. And we also have the ability to explore this using gross domestic product to see how exactly this was affected regionally. But in addition to this, if you wanted to explore this, how this affected GDP more directly from the GDP and income directly, we also have the ability to do that as well. And as well as through employment numbers. So we can go here by employment by industry. So as we can see, again, up until 2030, but just to check the industries in which that we particularly implement the changes in. We have the ability to do that as well. So as we can see, is that as expected, is that the two industries have had very positive changes until that. Sorry for Google in particular, Apple. In addition to this, you also have the ability to export these results using this particular tab. So whether you want this to be either in Excel file or CSV, it is your choice as well. So just to show you how this whole thing works. And outside from the foundational economic analysis variables, we also have the ability to explore this from a socioeconomic perspective, to whereas we can understand what communities are being affected by these policies. So we can first start by looking at our compensation distribution for North Carolina. So from a percent change perspective, before both companies were introduced to the region, actually the highest 20% were compensated the least. And so, but however, when Apple, or rather accounting for the compensation adjustment for Apple, as we can see, is that this increased by far the most over the years until about 2034. However, it seems as if that this was also a positive change, or rather a consistent change across the board for most industries. And in the way how in which that the industries are measured is that the lowest 20% are going to represent things such as retail and service. The second 20% is going to represent things such as like construction. And then the middle 20% and fourth 20% are going to represent industries that would be found in middle class or upper middle class labor categories. And then so this is also measured by wages. And we can also see this, or rather the inequality coefficient also helps us understand whether or not from these policy impacts, whether or not that the region was becoming more or less unequal over the years. So as we can see is that throughout the years, this actually contributed to inequality. But again, this tool gives policymakers and as well as stakeholders the ability to understand why and how. In addition to this, we can explore this employment by income level. And as we can see, is that during the construction years, during Apple's hub, this actually was a boom for those who worked in construction. But however, over the years, this decreased dramatically, and also after since 2032, no one really benefited from these changes. And we also can go a deeper layer by exploring employment by demographics as well. So we can either isolate this by race and gender or combine race and gender as well. So as we can see that relative to a percent change by the baseline, as that all races benefited starting in 2021, and then in 2031 is when things start to take a, well, rather before that, in 2020 is when things started to take a downturn, particularly for Hispanic and other non-Hispanic populations. So, and then as far as gender, we can also explore this further as well. Then we're just going to change this to percent change as well. And then this is representative of all races. So as expected, with increased constructions, increased males within the, being employed. But however, it seems as if that female and male comparisons were about the same, but however, female employment started to outpace in 2027. And then we can also throw an educational lens perspective on this as well. So whereas we can understand the jobs available in the economy, whether or not they require no bachelor's degree or bachelor's degree and above, and as well as a detailed education group breakdown. And so since this started in 2020 for all occupations, we can put this around the time in which that things kind of boomed a little. So we'll put this here in 2026. So as we can see, we saw a significant increase in jobs only requiring a high school diploma, and as well as some college or no degree. And so we can contribute that to the introduction of a major tech sector in North Carolina. And of course, since this is not particularly siloed towards Raleigh and Durham or what have you, we do have to acknowledge, I guess it's a good time to say, we do have to acknowledge the fact that most parts of North Carolina are very rural. So this is also taking into account of that as well. So especially with like the increased population and as well as demands for things such as residency and as well as non-residential buildings as this new income and as well as population is being introduced to the region. And as the last component, which I will show you all of, the socioeconomic indicators module, is going to be the labor force participation. So as we can see, that from a percent change perspective, the highest participation rate came from white non-Hispanic, which is expected according to North Carolina's population. The second was Black non-Hispanic, then other non-Hispanic, then Hispanic. But as we can see, is that once the policy shocks that would contribute to an economic boom kind of deteriorated, especially with like the massive hiring from both companies, this was not beneficial for everyone, or rather not at all, as most people left. So with that being said, we're going to go right back into the presentation. And so the last part of this is going to be just a quick conclusion of the presentation in which you all just saw. And so what the PI Plus model aims to do is basically to analyze the economic effects of the region, and as well as to give analysts, policymakers, and as well as stakeholders the tools to understand what is occurring within their economies, and as well as to be used as a communicative tool in order to understand the input, and then also to understand the implications of their actions if these things are implemented. And so this allows for our users to address these things in a constructive database framework that is backed by academic studies and as well as millions of dollars in grants that have been won using this particular software. And with that being said, we will now transition to our question and answers portion of this presentation. Thank you all so much for sticking with us, especially through the technical difficulties. And I will now hand it over to Amanda to facilitate it. Thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you, Gaisha. That was a great presentation. Again, if you have questions, you can always ask them in the questionnaire area. We'll start off with the first question. What is the smallest or largest geographic level that the model can show results for?
So the smallest would be a city, and really anything that is captured by the census blocks. So however, well, it depends upon how granular the data that is available that needs to be provided is what we can provide as well. And then the largest can be for the entire United States, depending upon your needs.
Thank you, Gaisha. The next question is, please explain why there would be negative results starting around year 2030. Were those years over year changes you were showing?
Yes, that is exactly correct. So due to the fact that there was no longer a policy shock, especially from the hiring boom and as well as the construction boom from building Apple's hubs, that's when the economy the economy started to downsize due to the fact that there was less hiring and as well as less construction that was needed in order to accommodate these new employment numbers and as well as the economic migrants that would be attracted to the region.
Thank you, Gaisha. Another question for you is, how could the model show how different demographic areas are affected for similar model stimulations?
Yes. So the way in which how they would show it is either you could either you can use our demographic tables in order to show these changes, or rather not to show, but to display these, to look at these changes, or either you can use our socio-economic socioeconomic indicators module in order to look at these changes. But as far as policy variables to show demographic changes, we have a wealth of those, which includes inputting changes to things such as economic migrants, the military population, and as well as population by race, age, can also be manipulated and play around with demographics.
Awesome. And that sums up the questions for today. If you have any questions that you thought of afterwards, you can always email info@remi.com and we can get back to you as soon as possible with some answers. For that, thank you again, Gaisha, for the wonderful presentation, and I hope you all have a great day today.
Yes, thank you, Amanda, and also thank you all for attending.
Thank you.